for step 27, the rear dampers, well, we need to put the springs and the spacers onto the rear dampers at this point. And I'm going to use X7 to give the back end a bit more of a stiffer suspension. If I find it's too much, I can always put the X6 or the X4 piece in. But we'll see how it goes. So we're going to need to do that, but we're also going to be installing these battery door pieces, which there's the pin that you will use when you're getting the battery on or in and out. And same thing on the other side, except there isn't the clip. So this side is solid, and then we're going to install both the rear shocks. Now, one thing to make note of, I mean, obviously it's showing rear coil springs too. There are 3 of these springs in the bag, but it's going to be pretty obvious that this one is the front one because look how much longer it is. So that's the only little piece that's different on here. So let's start by working on these shocks, and then we'll go to installing everything else. So let's get the ball collars onto this first. So we've got these little metal collars that have to be slipped into the top. Now what I find with these is you can't just grab your pliers and pop them in, because on the other side you'll block the collar from coming through. So you've kind of got to go on the edge of one and then pop it through. And that way it's in, but you haven't stopped it from coming through the other side. So if we were to just work on one of these for now, we're going to put on our spring just like that. We pull this up and we're going to put in one of these right here, which is going to fit over top and down just like that. And then on the top, we're going to put in that X7 piece, which will be the tensioner, and like I said, I want it to be a little bit stiffer. So that ultimately is what your shock is going to look like. It feels pretty smooth. So I'm happy with that. So we'll do the same thing with the other one. So we got to pop in this ball collar. Again, I can use the pliers, but just make sure it's out of the way of the hole. Which it should go in. It should not be difficult. Let's maybe do it this way so you can see what I mean, because you've got to keep the plier out of the way of the hole, otherwise it's not going to go through. There we go. So there, it's in. Again, I'm going to pop into that spring over top. We got to slide this over top so that it fits just like that. And then we're going to pull this down and pop in our tensioner. And there we go. So there are the 2 rear shocks, and they feel pretty smooth and stiff. So again, I may adjust that later, but for now we'll stick with that. Great. So those 2 shocks are done. So that part is finished. So now we can go back to working on the car. So if we install this side first, you can see that the top requires one of these screws here, the MA3s, goes through, then a washer, then the nut. So if I take one of these, we'll put this right here. We'll grab one of our shocks here, and we're going to take our screw. It's going to go through the ball collar, then it goes through the washer. It's going to go through that hole right there, and then we have our lock nut. Now the lock nut itself actually is going to fit inside of here. So if I push that in, we can actually now use our screwdriver to screw this all the way down. And don't over tighten, but definitely get it in there, because it's going to tighten itself to the lock nut. And I can feel the lock nut still moving around in there. There we go. One last turn. Yep. So that's nice and solid. And so now you can see that it's a matter of popping this onto our ball connector on the bottom, which we will do. So let's grab, in fact, they'll put this upside like this. And what we're going to end up having to do is do the same thing we did with the Super Saber. In fact, if I have it held on the side, I can grab this and the ball connector, pop on, and there we go. So is one of our rear shocks in place. And that feels really, really good, actually. And you can see the nut is inside of the bracket that we put on a much earlier step. So you'll know when it's in. And that feels pretty good. Just do it. Yeah, that's nice and solid. So since we've got this one on, why don't we just put the other one on next? So if I grab the washer, the MA3 screw, we've got our little lock nut here, which is going to fit into the back side of that bracket. We can then take our shock, slide this through the collar, then we'll grab our washer and we will stick that through and, oops, come on, washer again, and through there, washer there, and there we go. And now we will screw this in all the way, and you'll know when you get to the end because it pretty much resists, because then you've gone all the way through the lock nut. There we go. And again, we're going to get that shock attached to the ball connector. So I think I'll do it this way this time. And stick that onto there. In fact, it's going to be easier if I use the two hands. Actually, hold up. I want to get that onto there. There. And there we go. So there is our other rear shock in place. And again, that feels pretty good. Nice. And I love how the yellow kind of just pops because everything else is black. So this looks good. I like it. So now let's get the brackets on next. So if we work on this side first, you can see that we grab one of these pieces here, and then there's a C4 piece and then a screw, and then we have a one of the, the snap pins. So what we're going to do here is we're going to grab our screw, grab the bracket. That is going to sit on top just like this. So we'll screw this in. There we go. And then we have the screw pin that's going to go, or the snap pin that'll go into there to hold it. But if you were taking this off to get the battery, and I can adjust that so that it's not, maybe not so tight, doesn't matter, but I'll loosen it just a touch. Gives it a little bit more freedom. But the point is, when you turn this over and then pop it on top, you'll use the screw pin to lock it in place, and now the battery should be solid inside there. So the only difference on the other side is we don't have the snap pin anymore. We just have the screws. So on this side, we're going to be screwing these all the way in and down, and it'll be a permanent thing. So let's do that. Let's grab the other one. Same thing. I'm just going to get this started actually, and then I'm going to turn it this way. So again, we've got a lot more leverage to actually screw this in properly. There we go. So now on this side, it's nice and tight. And then on this side, we have the ability to pop the pin out, which actually is a fairly stiff pin. I'll just use some scissors there. And then we can pop that out and slide it open for the battery. Very cool. So now that the shocks and the battery brackets are on, that step number 27 is finished. So we're going to be able to move on now, and we're going to go to 28, and we're going to build up the front damper.